Actor Robert Kaczynski came out earlier this week with the fear that Trekkies will not like the new Section 31 film because it's not a new Next Generation episode. He said, and I quote, "It is not the Trek people want." And after I have read this, I too fear this new film. Because why would you make something that people don't want? This is the Review of Champions, and I'm your host, Grandmaster. With me is a powerful panel made up of the finest champions Sakar has to offer. Let me introduce them to you. First up, we have Mr. Taylor First. How are you?
I'm excellent.
Voice only, we have Mr. Lord Deathman.
I'm doing great today, thanks.
And last but not least, new to Trek. Well, are you still new to Trek? Yes, I guess you all still are. Murph, how are you, man?
I'm fantastic, and I think this might be my 1-year anniversary.
Yeah,
since we started.
It is. Yes, exactly. We're in year 2 of the Star Trek project, people. Still 4 to go. This is episode 13 of the Star Trek project, where we will be reviewing Star Trek, all of it in order of release, sort of. Today, we'll talk about Star Trek The Next Generation Season 3. Well, except for the last episode. We throw in the best of both worlds, part 1, in with our Season 4 review next month. Since then, we can just talk about the complete story. And trust me, we will. Before we dive into our discussion, I want to ask you all to help us out. Like and share this video, subscribe to our channel, and join our forum at sakar.freeforums.net. Just click on the link in the description, and then you can set up an account and join our conversation. And yes, you can join our shows, even the Star Trek project if you want to. As mentioned before, we will be discussing 25 of season 3 of Star Trek, 25 episodes of season 3 of Star Trek: The Next Generations today. So let's dive right into it. And we start off with our section, Grandmaster's Picks. And this time I picked yesterday's Enterprise, The Offspring, and Sins of the Father. And the fun part is, well, that was a sequence, but it was a great sequence, wasn't it, Taylor?
Yes, it was. A lot of good episodes this season, but those 3 are all very good.
Yeah. You want to talk about one in particular, or all 3, or?
Well, yesterday's Enterprise is a very interesting episode. Involves alternate universe stuff. Brings back Tasha Yar. We all knew she made a mistake when she left the show in the first season. I liked how it built off of what had happened in previous episodes, and of course, it sets up things that will happen in future episodes. So it's a pretty important moment in the series history. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. There's alternate reality where the Federation's at war with the Klingons, and everything is doom and gloom, but they make the right decisions with this Enterprise from the past and set things back to the way they should be in the, I don't know what you would call it, the Prime universe. So again, very interesting episode. Again, I'm going to be saying this throughout the whole series, but great acting. I really like that episode. The other one I really like, of course, is the one with Worf's brother, the Klingon.
Sins of the Father.
Sins of the Father. That's the one. Okay, that's a real great episode. Of course, it's really good for character development of Worf himself. We see a lot about Klingon culture and the Klingon government and the inner workings there. Of course, it's sets up his the whole thing with his father and his family being shamed and ostracized because of politics, really, not because of the truth. And that is another storyline that will continue on into the future throughout the series. His brother, of course, is played by Tony Todd, the great actor who just recently passed away. But he did a great job as the brother. So again, that's Klingon episodes are almost always always good, and this one introduced some Klingon characters that we will be seeing a lot more of as time goes on, and we'll be talking about in the future. The whole Klingon government situation is pretty well established in this episode. So yeah, they're all all good episodes.
Mm-hmm. Murph, I know you like Klingon episodes, so I guess you want to talk about Sins of the Father as well.
Would I? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. First off, I'll say when I was watching these episodes, I finished this stretch, this episode 15, 16, 17, the ones that you picked.
Yeah.
And I finished them before I looked and saw that you picked them. And I was like, these were great episodes. Let me go look and see what Grandmaster picked for the ones that he wanted to talk about. And then you picked the 3 that I had just watched. And I was like, well, that tracks, So I was very pleased to see that, like, I was watching these and I thought they were great. And then I went to the board and saw that you picked them, and I was like, "Oh, of course, well, these are great." So, yeah, all 3 great picks.
Contrary to popular belief, I sometimes know what I'm doing.
Yeah. So once I finished Sins of the Father, I didn't even watch the rest of the season. I was like, they're not going to get better than this, so I just skipped ahead. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, Sins of the Father was great. I love Klingon stuff. I'll just say it. I'm probably not unique in that regard. I feel like that's probably a common sentiment. But anytime you feature the Klingons and their culture and their people, like, it's just great. I get so enveloped in the way that they do things, and everything in this episode was just great. The whole fake honor thing, like it's honorable, but it's also deceptive, and it's not really honorable at all in this whole thing, and in this whole big charade. But that's kind of how their culture is based, and I think it's fantastic. I also thought The Offspring was good with where Data has a kid, and I probably relate too many things to this at this point, but anytime there's we'll just say an android that creates a life, I always go back to Ultron and Vision and Ant-Man and that father-son dynamic that's so twisted and horrible that they have. And it's great. It's great storytelling there, and I just can't help but think of that every time I come across it in every other medium. Mm-hmm. In Yesterday's Enterprise, another fantastic one. Tasha Yar was one of my early favorites in season 1 as far as character goes. And whenever she was, whenever she left the show / was killed off, I was kind of sad. I was like, what's going on? Why did they get rid of her? But she was really, at the time, it was also like they kind of pushed her to the back, and that's back in season 1 anyway. But it was really cool to see her here. Even though it's an alternate timeline. And I thought that made it really interesting. It also built up, how do you say her name? Guinan?
Guinan, yeah.
Guinan.
Yeah, it built up her character a little bit more, which is very mysterious to me at the moment. I don't know if she gets fully fleshed out and explained later, but like right now, I'm like, every time she steps up into the forefront of an episode, I'm like, okay, what is going on? She's way too in the know or powerful or whatever. So, yeah, I loved all 3 of these episodes. They were fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lord Deathman. My favorite episode of the 3 is The Offspring, because it is a direct sequel, follow-up on the episode we discussed last month, The Measure of a Man. At least it feels like that to me.
It is. And I will say, though, while I appreciate that it is your favorite of the 3, it actually is my least favorite of the 3 that you picked, although I still feel it's an incredibly strong episode. The only thing I've really ever held critically about this episode is I'm always on the fence about Hallie Todd's portrayal of Lal, and that is the actress who played Data's daughter. Sometimes I watch the episode and her performance seems really poignant, and then sometimes I watch the episode and I'm like, maybe she could have made some different choices. But in any event, this is a strong episode regardless of the little bit of nitpicking that I'm going to do. And I think a part of it is Data's struggle to put himself in the context of like humanity, and understanding that one of the things that human beings do to kind of reaffirm their place in the universe is reproduction, right? They have children, they try to pass on their values and their understanding of the world. And that's a pretty primal urge that Data seizes on, and it gets really, really hard at the end of this episode not to get invested because of the cascade failures with Law. And of course, I'm spoiling this episode, but obviously, this is a failed experiment in trying to replicate his own positronic brain. And as he continues to try and make the repairs, and he can operate at faster than human speed to kind of keep up with the failures, but even he can't. And eventually, Law does pass away.
Mhm.
So from the beginning of this episode, where it's made plain, because I think as a science fiction fan back then, being a little younger, you always kind of thought that androids had an assigned sex and they were guys or they were girls, or something in between. But this episode introduced me to the idea that they could pick whatever they wanted, right? That they weren't necessarily stuck in a choice and could take some time to determine what kind of gender and gender norms that they wanted to follow. So it was great that they kind of explored that and made this really different than what it would be like for the human development cycle for someone having a child there. But
Yeah.
it's a wonderful episode.
Star Trek made a point out of this in 1989, and we're now in 2024, 2025, and it's still a thing. Gender, gender identity.
It's indeed. So look, if you want to get insight into the debate, people who are still wondering about transgender identities, check out your Star Trek. Even Deep Space Nine has an episode that kind of covers that toward territory. But I also wanted to give a couple of quick notes about the other episodes that you mentioned, which are also fantastic. Yesterday's Enterprise is a classic episode. I don't think any fan would debate that in any serious way. There's not much to say about it that everybody else hasn't always said. But I just want to talk about my impressions when I first saw it, because I have a very strong memory. I know when the episode opens and it's kind of like, oh, they're about to face another spatial anomaly. Like you're kind of settling in for a particular type of story when the setup starts that way. But where you go from the very beginning of routine Star Trek spatial anomaly to something that covers the lost years between big maroon red suits and the next generation, like they tried to kind of fill in that gap a little bit with this episode. They strengthen Guinan's character. They bring back a character that we thought was long dead. Where this episode takes you from start to finish was just incredible in terms of how it managed to add more world building and depth to the character development of each of the characters. And again, just an incredibly brilliant episode in terms of the writing and the world building. Love the alternate suits that everybody on the Enterprise gets in the new militaristic timeline. you end up wearing a sidearm at all times, and you have these weird sashes and all that stuff. But love how they cheaply improvised an alternate version of the standard TNG era uniform. Well, Sins of the Father, yes, great episode. I also have to say, rest in peace, Tony Todd. He's a huge part of my cinema going experience, starting as a young Death Lord and now into adulthood. We lost a huge talent in the world of genre filmmaking, and there won't be anybody who can replace him anytime soon. But this was his first appearance as Kern on TNG, and he would go on to have many appearances as this character later on. And I think what stood out to me in this episode is that they kind of build on Klingon culture. The story is compelling in terms of Moog and whether he was a traitor during the Romulan Klingon wars, and all of that kind of drama and intrigue in the episode is just beautifully done, and they build up all of that storytelling in the end to some fateful choices, not easy, neat choices. Worf really has to struggle with acting in the interests of his own honor, his own culture, and for the first time, having to juggle that with his Federation interests and the oath that he made to Starfleet. So incredibly dynamic episode. But what really stood out to me about it is that they added depth to I wouldn't say Klingons were cartoonish or one-dimensional at that point. They were, I mean, the movies expanded on what Klingons are and what their values and belief systems are. But this one really showed you that they're a complex race, that while honor and duty and loyalty are things that they are always forward with in the warrior culture, there is deception. There is corruption. So they're a very dynamic and complex people, and that always stood out to me about that episode.
Yeah, it's almost like politics are corrupting people. Almost. I wouldn't dare say that, of course. Murph, I also asked you guys to pick one or maybe two episodes which you would like to discuss. What's your pick?
I went with Menage a Troy for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Quick recap. This is the episode where there's a trade summit or something like that, and there's some Ferengi guys who kidnap Deanna Troi, Commander Riker, and Deanna's mother, Luxwana. And there's during the kidnapping whole process, there's a little bit of seduction, there's some imprisonment, there's some chess games, and there's some really interesting acting from characters all around. I thought this episode, quick, I guess, content potentially triggering warning here. Like, this episode does have some things that may not have stood the test of time all that well. I mean, there's like, I don't know if you want to call it human trafficking, but they essentially kidnap women and then they transport them, and the Ferengi are very sexist, and they basically transport them in the nude, and which is a bit of a shock. So there's some things here that may not feel as appropriate nowadays as maybe it did then. I don't know.
But you need to see this from a Ferengi perspective. In their culture, women are naked.
Correct. So, I mean, it's not something that bothers me, but it's something I saw whenever I was like looking at stuff on this episode online, where people are just like upset about it. And that just feels like a modern thing to do, just to be upset about everything. But I just want to get that
again, I want to stress, you cannot put today's morals on content made 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago. That's something you cannot do because you don't know how the time was, especially if you're younger. I lived through the 80s. I know how the 80s were. This was normal back then.
Yeah. And I would especially say it doesn't bother me because the Ferengi aren't real people. So they can be as sexist and as weird about everything as they want. And I have the option to be entertained by it or not. So,
yes.
But the weird thing is I found this episode very humorous. For a lot of different reasons, despite any kind of odd, uncomfortableisms about it. The mental dialogue between Luxwana and her daughter, Deanna, I thought was hilarious throughout most of the episode. I mean, they're basically just bashing these Ferengi via mind, telepathy. Commander Riker has propped himself in the last season 2. He took a step up, and this season he's taken a step up for me as far as a character that I really enjoy watching. So to see him here also, where he's adapting, he's trying to find a way out of his prison cell, and to do that, he's using the earlier chess match with a Ferengi as bait, essentially, like saying, I'll play chess with you if you let me out. And then it doesn't even show us how he knocks the guy out. We just know we see him later, and he's like, they got sharp teeth, and I thought that was funny. And the big highlight for me is Luxwana. I don't have the actress's name in front of me, but she is a character, and everything that she does throughout this entire episode had me laughing for one reason or another. For everything from her treatment of the Ferengi, and there's a moment here where Luxwana, you think they're going to leave Luxwana with the Ferengi. She's like, go ahead, go without me, be saved, I'll be fine. And I thought that was really going to happen because Luxwana is the type of person who strikes me that she would be in charge of the Ferengi within a month's time. Like, she just has that authoritarian, like, manner about her that she's just going to control their entire society like within a year at most. It's just going to be the Troy. It's not going to be the Ferengi anymore. It's just going to be Lwaxana Troy's nation of people or whatever planet. So I just loved her in this episode. And then the other big highlight for me, which had me laughing, was the deception later on whenever she goes to play the Ferengi but Picard. There's like a ruse there where she's pretending like Picard's an old lover out to, kill all of her potential suitors to scare the Ferengi into giving her back. And the way that Picard's transition in this episode, or in this scene in particular, where he goes from hesitant and confused to like full-on delivery of this Shakespearean monologue where he's gonna slaughter the Ferengi if they don't give back his one and only love. I just love the little arc there where you can see him growing in that character and then really expressing himself, and just that you can see his wheels turning while he's speaking. Okay, I gotta do, and then by the end of it, he can't even turn it off. And I thought that was great. Easily the funniest episode of the season for me. And one more thing, my beloved Wesley Crusher got promoted to full cadet or whatever you want to. He's not an ensign anymore, I think, or maybe it is an ensign. He's not a. Whatever. He got promoted. So
he's now Ensign Wesley Crusher. He still needs to shut up.
Yeah.
He was acting ensign. Now he's an actual ensign.
He might still need to shut up, but I did like that. They gave him a little bit of a bump. I don't know if it comes with pay or not, but good for him. So I really had fun with this episode a lot. I'm sorry.
The actor's name is Michelle Barrett. If I don't butcher the name, but Taylor will no doubtly correct me. She was Gene Roddenberry's life's partner, and she also voiced the computer.
Okay.
And she was the Nurse Chapel in the original series. The blonde one.
The one from the first season of the original series? Was she in the first season?
No, she was in all 3 seasons as Nurse Chapel. She was a lot with Dr. McCoy in sickbay.
Okay.
The blonde one.
I'm sure I'd recognize her. I can't picture it now. I was thinking of a different character.
But I agree.
The only less than perfect person on the entire ship.
Okay.
Yeah, but she is Star Trek royalty, and I do mean royalty.
Yes, she is.
Taylor, you also had a pick, of course, for your own. So let's hear it.
Yeah, I picked The Defector, which is one of my favorite episodes of the entire series. In it, they are near the neutral zone. They get a distress call from a Romulan scout ship. It's being attacked by other Romulan ships. The person on board requests asylum. They bring him on board. He claims that he is a mid-level logistics officer who has secret information about a pending Romulan invasion of the Federation. There's a lot of twists. There's a lot of geopolitics that gets involved. It's a very Picard has to make huge decisions because they're so far away that it takes hours to get messages back and forth from Starfleet. He has to make decisions that could send the Federation into war. They later find out that this person that they brought on board, the Romulan, is in fact an admiral. He was lying about who he was. They don't trust him. They didn't trust him before. They still don't trust him now. They think they're trying to trick him. They're trying to trick the Enterprise into starting a war, as opposed to him claiming he's trying to prevent a war by giving the Federation a warning so that they can prevent it. Anyway, the acting all around is spectacular, especially Captain Picard. Patrick Stewart, his acting is fantastic in this. The Romulan officers' acting is also very good. And of course, it all turns out in the end, a third big twist in this episode is that he was sincere, but all of his information was wrong, and it had been fed to him by the Romulan leadership to do exactly what the Enterprise was afraid of, and trick them into being the aggressor and starting a conflict. And Picard gets out of it all by very cleverly playing his own hand and bringing in some help from the Klingons just in time to prevent the Enterprise from being destroyed by the Romulan fleet. So again, a lot of twists, a lot of turns, a lot of great acting. One thing I'm going to point out, though, a flaw that's in this whole series, frankly, and the Next Generation, a couple of things actually. One mistake they made was giving Romulans those brow ridges. They never should have done that. Romulans are supposed to be completely identical to Vulcans, but now Vulcans don't have those brow ridges, but for some reason they gave the brow ridges to the Romulans. Okay, that's fine. But the other problem is, just to give credit to the original series hair and makeup people, Spock's hair always looked like hair. Sarak's hair looked like real hair. Romulans in this show, their hair is such terrible wigs that just look awful. And this guy, his wig is almost falling off in some scenes. All right, so that's just a nitpick. And again, just giving credit to those 1960s folks in Hollywood and how much care that they put into them hair and makeup effects with what little they had. You know, there's two problems with Romulans in the Next Generation, but they always make for great episodes. So I'm glad that they bring them in a lot. But again, this episode, again, the espionage aspect to it, the geopolitical aspect to it, the incredibly weighty, difficult decisions that Picard has to make throughout this episode, and his creative solutions to problems, all real highlights for me. So overall, really great episode.
I agree. I really like this episode as well. But I like a lot of episodes in season 3. But I only could pick 3. But I could have picked a lot more. Lord Deathman, you also had a pick or two to discuss.
I do. Yeah, this is really the season where I felt the show really started to get going. It was picking up a lot of great momentum. It had been good prior to this, but I felt like the writing, the cinematography, the way they were staging things, special effects, all of that sort of took not a quantum leap, but a step up in a way that was very noticeable, I think, in season 3. And as everyone says, season 3 had a lot of great episodes. But a couple that really stand out to me in order of preference. One of my favorites is an episode called The Most Toys. And to summarize that episode, Data is kidnapped by a somewhat obsessive collector by the name of Kivas Fajo, a great villain name if ever there was one. And Fajo fakes Data's death in a shuttlecraft accident. He then adds Data to his collection of rare and unique items, kind of treating him as a prized collection piece. Of course, Data refuses to cooperate with Fajo, and he attempts to escape several times. And at the same time in this episode, you have the Enterprise crew trying to investigate Data's apparent death and kind of uncover the truth. The ending is, no huge surprise. Data does ultimately outsmart Fajo, and he is eventually rescued. But it's a really compelling episode to me for a number of different reasons, and the most important of them is the fact that Kivas Fajo probably represents the type of villain that we no longer see on television and in the movies. We probably have to look to books and literature to get that kind of villain. But he's a villain who's doing what he's doing simply because he can do it. He's incredibly selfish and narcissistic. He doesn't have a greater agenda. He's not misunderstood. He isn't, an underdog that you should sympathize with. Kivas Fajo is a sociopath and a truly narcissistic being. So I lament the loss of villains like that in popular media. So I always turn to that episode as a favorite. But because of Kivas Fajo's kind of sociopathic nature, this really pushes Data's ethical programming to its extreme, because during the episode, he considers killing Fajo when he realizes that he can't quite outsmart him, and that Fajo has a countermeasure for almost anything that Data can do to try and overcome him. And he uses a number of different techniques and devices. So he has a kit of special weapons that Data can't seem to overcome. He uses psychological manipulation to control Data. It's really a really fleshed out villain, and I don't think that this episode gets enough credit for being as kind of full of dramatic depth as it is. So, a little piece of trivia about this episode: Saul Rubinek, who plays Kivas Fajo, was a last-minute substitute for another actor by the name of David Rappaport, who I think had been on the original series of Star Trek, and he was going to play Fajo, but unfortunately, a deeply personal issue had sidelined him from the role. But if you have the shout outs to Physical Media, but if you have the season 3 Blu-rays or DVDs of season 3 of TNG, you will see that they included some of the alternate footage with David Rappaport playing the Fajo character. And I think he had an interesting take. But at the end of the day, Saul Rubinek was probably the more masterful performance as Fajo. So love that episode. Check it out if you haven't seen it. And a couple of others that stood out to me just really quickly. Booby Trap. It's kind of rare to get the good Geordi LaForge episode. I always feel like they were putting him in oddly compromising positions. And this episode actually is no exception to that. But it introduces a character, I think a fan favorite, or maybe a universally hated character in Star Trek. But Dr. Leah Brahms, who would play a significant role in Geordi's, let's say, his romantic life. But a quick synopsis of that episode is that the Enterprise becomes ensnared in an ancient booby trap while investigating an older derelict ship. And the nature of the trap is that it drains energy from the Enterprise, and they can't seem to stop it because eventually it's going to drain all of the power from the Enterprise, and it's going to kind of get stuck in this minefield where everyone will slowly die as systems kind of wink out. But really great episode for Geordi. And again, we introduced the holographic version of Dr. Brahms to this. So I've always liked that one. Then there's an episode called Allegiance, where Picard is abducted and replaced by an alien duplicate on the Enterprise. Not a unique or original scenario for Star Trek. They've done that a couple of times. But Picard does find himself in a cell with 3 other prisoners as a part of an experiment on authority and leadership. And of course, the Picard that replaces him on the Enterprise, the crew starts to become suspicious of the fake Picard as he displays kind of increasingly odd behavior. So I won't go into spoilers for that, but the time that they spend in the prison cell, the 3 prisoners, Picard and 2 other prisoners there, having to work together to figure out a solution for what is actually going on, who has abducted them, how can they escape from this cell. It's kind of like, I won't call it exactly a Sherlock Holmes locked room mystery, but there is a mystery to solve, and all 3 parties kind of have to cooperate despite their differences to figure out what is happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are my 3 definitely that I would kind of point out from the season that I don't think any of the other champions have talked about or hopefully plan to talk about.
Taylor.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Lord Deathman's thoughts on that particular episode. While the scenes on the Enterprise where they're figuring out that it's not actually Picard are interesting, the scenes in that cell are really interesting and really fascinating. The interactions between there's at first 3, and then there's another character brought in, and of course it turns out at some point that one of them is not a real prisoner; they're a fake, part of the experiment. But yeah, it was really fascinating. So I'm glad Lord Deathman chose that one.
Yeah, I agree. Murph, you have anything to add?
No, that Allegiance was one of the ones that was on my short list as well. I really like that episode. I really like the, especially like the crew camaraderie or whatever you want to call it at the end, where the scene where, you know, he's like, just with a nod, I can communicate easily with everyone in this room. You know, I really thought that showed like how well developed this crew really is, like as far as understanding and trusting each other and just knowing whenever something's wrong. And just in general, I'll just say that I missed Dr. Pulaski in this season, but I really grew to like Dr. Crusher, who I didn't really care for in season 1 the last time we saw her, but I liked her a lot in this season. And this episode was one of the episodes that I really highlighted as one of the reasons why I liked her interaction with fake Picard in Allegiance. And I really liked her in The High Ground as well, which is another kind of Dr. Crusher-centric episode. And just a shout out to Sarek as well. That episode, just for the continuity of it, the bringing back that character from the original series. I really enjoyed that. And the scene whenever they do the mind transfer thing, or I guess the scene whenever you see like just how torturous it is from Picard's perspective, what Sarek must be going through on a daily basis, like that was a really, really impactful scene for a lot of different reasons. And it's like kind of got this brief touch of like dementia, I guess. Like there's like layers of you can see how they took dementia and ran with it in the sci-fi scenario here. So I thought that was really, really cool episode.
Yeah.
In that episode, Sarek had a new human wife because Vulcans lived so long. He had to get a new human wife. But Sarek loves the humans, man. He's got that human fever going on there.
Yeah, he fetishizes. No. Never mind. But that episode actually, Patrick Stewart can act, right? Yeah. He can act.
Yeah, he was spectacular in that scene.
Oh, Patrick Stewart is spectacular in anything. Lord Devman, what was it with the phone book you once said?
Yes, Patrick Stewart is literally a person that I would go to a performance of him reading through the Yellow Pages.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, that will conclude this month's episode of the Star Trek Project. We hope you have enjoyed our discussion today. If you did, like and share this review and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want more of us, join our forum at Sakar.free. Just click on the link in the description. Our next episode of the Star Trek Project will be not next month, but later this month, because we will review Section 31 at the weekend it comes out, and we will slot it right into our Star Trek Project. Don't forget to check out our Star Wars review series for Skeleton Crew. For Marvel fans, we have a review for What If Season 3 waiting, and DC fans, don't worry. In a few weeks, we will drop our season review for Creature Commando, so everybody gets a treat. For now, I want to thank you all, also on behalf of our champion, and wish you to live long and prosper. Bye.